Okay, I'll step out for like 2 minutes real quickly. I'll be
Sure.
back.
Sounds good.
I'm actually
Hi,
curious,
there. Uh-huh.
for this panel, is it going to be you guys are asking us questions or are the audience members asking us questions for majority of the time?
Great question. So the questions will primarily be derived from the commentary in the chat and Q&A from students, but we'll relay them to you. So we'll moderate the discussion, but the questions should be coming directly from students for the most part. If there aren't any questions, Hannah and I can certainly stimulate some conversation, but for the most part, yeah, we're asking questions from the students themselves.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Of course, thanks for coming. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session today. We are going to give it a few more minutes to allow all of our panelists as well as all of our audience members to come and join us. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and comment in the chat which program you are considering attending on UCEAP. So if you already know which country you're thinking about, which program in particular, it's always really helpful for us to know. And you will hear me reiterate that a couple times as more students join, but welcome in and we look forward to hearing from you. Vivian, are you still in town at your home institution? Are you elsewhere in the world?
I am, yeah. I'm still at UCSD, but I go back up to LA tonight for Thanksgiving, heading up early.
Oh, very nice. That'll be fun. Evan, are you back at your UC as well?
Yeah, I've been back since the summer, basically. So ever since then, I've just been here at UCSB.
Very nice. Well, people have started commenting. Jojo is thinking about the University of Hong Kong. Drake is thinking about summer global internships in Singapore. So super exciting. And I see we still have a few more people joining us. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along to today's talk. If you're just joining us, please feel welcome to place in the chat which program you are considering attending for UCEAP. We're going to give it another couple minutes just to ensure everyone's here with us before we get started today. Hi, Daniel.
Oh, hello. I'm just fixing my lighting. I just got
Oh,
home.
no problem. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Hannah, we're still waiting on one of our panelists. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
And I can send her. Oh, she's here. Perfect.
All righty. Seems like we have all of our panelists with us. I think we'll give it another minute just to allow other students to join. But thank you, Xavier, for placing in the chat that you're thinking about going to Japan for Osaka program. That's great. Anyone else who wants to contribute to the chat and let us know where you're thinking about studying, or if you already have questions you want to ask our panelists, you're more than welcome to place them into the Q&A now, and we will go ahead and read them out when our session begins. So Hannah and I did want to give a note of how we'll run this is that we might not have every panelist answer every question. Considering we have 5 of y'all, it may be more relevant just if the question feels like it strikes a note with you and you want to answer, great. And if not, we'll move on to the next question. Hopefully that one will. Sometimes with these panels, it's great to have every member contribute, but sometimes that can mean that we stay on a topic for a long time if we have 5. And last session, we had a lot of questions, so we want to make sure we can get to as many as possible. So if you do have an interest in answering the question, just raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself and go ahead and respond. Okay. All right, Hannah, what do you think? Should we get started shortly?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Just so everyone's aware, we are recording this session for those who registered but were not able to attend live. So we're going to kind of do almost like a reset, even though we've all been talking together now and getting started. We're going to have a bit of a formal restart of the session just for the purpose of the webinar. So thanks everybody for joining, and I'll kick us off in just a moment. Right. Thank you everyone for joining our International Education Week session on UCEAP returnees from Asia. This is a panelist style session. We're very excited to have you all here. Thank you to our panelists for joining, and thank you for all of those in attendance today and those of you watching our recording. We're just going to get started here by talking about the session focus. So just want to share a quick reminder that the focus of this session is a returnee panel. It's geared toward what life is like abroad in Asia. So you can ask our recent returnee panelists questions about anything from what to pack to how to handle homesickness. Keep in mind that program-specific questions should be directed to your UC Campus Study Abroad office or the UCEAP system-wide office for assistance. We do have many different programs in all of our countries in Asia, so our wonderful panelists here can talk about their experiences generally in these countries, and they may speak directly to their specific program experience, but just keep in mind that some of your specific questions about your program may better be directed to your UC Campus Study Abroad office or UCEAP. So before I stop sharing my screen, I just want to have everyone who's here as a panelist written down. So if those of you can see where everybody's from, which UC campus, which country they studied abroad in, and when. And just want to share this now, but to make this more like a friendly roundtable, I'm going to stop sharing so that we can have everybody kind of in one spot on our Zoom meeting here. And if everyone can feel free to start asking questions, I'll hand it over to Bryn. Oh, actually, Bryn will be introducing everybody.
It's no problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Bryn Lemon, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement and Scholarships for our system-wide office for UCEAP. I am also an alumna of our program, so I did my undergraduate degree at UCSB, where I studied English literature. And while studying there, I studied abroad at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland for a full year. I then graduated from UCSB and moved back to Scotland for a second year to work for our programs before moving down to Chile and eventually winding up back here in Santa Barbara. So I'm a passionate advocate for study abroad. And Hannah, did you want to introduce yourself as well before we let our panelists go for it?
Sure. I'm Hannah Vandersall. I've been at UCAP for about 9 years. I am a UC Davis alum, and I also studied abroad through UCAP, but in the UK, so not relevant to our topic today, but happy to be here and really grateful to all the panelists here to share your experiences.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we can go in the order that I see on my screen. So Evan, if you'd like to introduce yourself first, please go for it.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. My name's Evan. I'm a student at UCSB. Currently, I do actually work at the UCSB EAP program office as like a peer advisor, but I'm currently a third year, and I went abroad last year for the full year in the International Christian University in Tokyo.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Vivian, would you like to go next?
Of course, thank you. So, hi everyone. My name is Vivian. Currently a senior at UC San Diego studying international business and marketing. And during my third year, I studied abroad at Yonsei University in South Korea for a full year.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, Pavel, would you like to go next?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Pavel Martinez. I'm a recent graduate from UC Davis. I graduated in Japanese studies and I did a summer study abroad at Yonsei University in South Korea. Thank you.
Fantastic. Daniel, would you like to take over?
Hello, everybody. I am Daniel Reglado Ortiz. I graduated in class of 2023 from UC Irvine, and I did the spring session at National University of Singapore.
Excellent. And then Jindu, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, I'm Sindor and I graduated from UCSB and was a UCEAP participant on at the Chinese University of Hong Kong for a full year. Actually, I'm not a recent returnee because that was a few years ago, but currently I'm the study abroad advisor at UCAP, and I have Japan and India on my portfolio as well. So yeah, I'm here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for all of those introductions. And then Hannah and I are working on welcoming one more alum into our group of panelists, but I'm having a tough time promoting them. Hannah, are you able to do so?
It looks like they may have dropped off the call, so we'll try and get them on a little bit later.
Okay, great. Then I'll go ahead and email them while we're going through our process. So in the meantime, thank you all so much for your introductions. It's great to see such a variety of programs here. If you can go ahead and type into the Q&A if you are a participant here on the call, if you are thinking about studying abroad, and we'd love to hear your questions for our panelists. We can certainly ask questions, Hannah and I, but it's always best to be able to answer the ones that you have that are pressing on your mind. And we can go ahead and get started perhaps with discussing some academic differences that you experienced while abroad. So I know we have people from all our different programs here, so I'm sure there's going to be a wide variety of experiences. But when you compare your experience at your UC campus to your experience abroad, how would you generally compare the rigor of the coursework, the pace of the coursework, and the type of assessment that you experienced?
I'll go. So in my case, the rigor was quite different. UC Davis does the quarter system, and I attended a summer program, which was kind of similar in length. However, the layout of the classes was quite different. I encourage everyone who's looking for any program to look at the curriculum before actually applying, because in my case, I actually had I had 3 classes every single day, and they were the same classes. So I actually was in school from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. every single day. Not Monday through Thursday. So I felt like I was back in high school. As for the rigor, though, because mine was a summer program where it's mostly international students coming to Yonsei, it was more catered towards students wanting to actually do extracurriculars or explore the city, the country. So it was not actually as rigorous as my classes back in Davis. So I think it depends a lot on the program, but in my case, I was able to really relax in terms of my classes. And of course, I had tests, I had midterms, I had homework, but a lot of the work was actually done within the class, especially because all the classes were 2 hours each one. I hope that answered your question. And it all depends which classes you take as well.
Go for it, Daniel.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that I also came from like the quarter system, and trying to adjust it into the semester system of Singapore was interesting because it was 15 weeks long compared to the 10-week course. So the first 4 weeks felt really, really slow. It was it was, although it was fun being in the class, it just felt that like I am here for an eternity. But as the semester went on, it did catch up to pace to nearly to what I felt like in the quarter system. But I felt that the rigor of the classes were actually pretty similar because with the NUS, they when you're trying to enroll into a class, you also have to make sure that the class you're in, if you already took a prerequisite in your home college, then it might fulfill it, or you might have to take one beforehand. And so you're either going to take the class that's at the same level or sometimes a level below, just because of how strict they are with their prerequisites.
I can go next. So for Hong Kong, I think their academic culture is quite different from the US. Because I think the biggest difference and what I had to adjust the most and adapt was the number of group projects or like way more than in the US. Um, and the final grades are almost determined just by the midterm and final exams. for the entire semester and the group projects. So like there won't be like quizzes as what we're used to at UC. So, and I think the biggest group project I was in had 9 people, which was pretty insane because it's even not really possible to have all 9 people together to meet in person at the same time. So, yeah, I think that was one of the biggest challenges, but also it could be fun, and it was a interesting academic experience for me.
Yeah, I just want to add from my experience, mine actually ended up, my time at ICU was actually very similar to what I experienced at UCSB, mainly because ICU is quarter system like UCSB. So I had a very similar experience, and the grade system, like as in the letter grades and whatnot, very similarly set up, and coursework and presentations and whatnot, very similar structures to how they would do it at UCSB. I know that's very different from like most UCAP programs in general, given that most are semesters and a lot of programs and schools just have very different grading systems in general. But my time at ICU in particular was very akin to that of UCSB.
Thank you so much, Evan. That's great. We have another panelist who's joined us, Tamea. So thanks so much for coming along. Do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself to everyone with your UC campus, your host institution, and maybe just a little background of when you went?
Hello, I'm Timea. I'm here at UCLA, and I went to Japan in the summer of 2024. The program was Japanese in Osaka with Osaka University. It was a short-term language program, so it was a little different from the academic programs where you do more classes.
Thank you so much. We're so happy that you're here to join us. So, Hannah, did we want to move on to a new topic now?
Sure. I saw some questions that might were initially kind of specific to one student, but I think they're actually kind of good for everybody to hear. We have a lot of quarter campus alums here, and 7 of our 9 UC universities are on the quarter system, but the vast majority of universities abroad are on semester systems. So we were getting some questions about how does, as a quarter campus student, how does studying abroad on a spring semester work? So I don't know if anyone wants to chat about that. In most cases, you do miss your winter and spring quarter, but on UCAP, the number of courses and units you are in are designed to fit for a full-time load for a semester program if you are on a semester program. I believe, Evan, I think your system was probably on quarters at International Christian University, but I think that is one of the exceptions. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, navigating, I think I want to say, Daniel, you may have touched on it when you talked about that 15 weeks versus 10 weeks, but any other thoughts? Happy to hear it.
I'm going to go ahead and say that because we were on the semester system, we had about a 3-month break from winter, because usually in our quarter system, our break is usually 1 month and then we start our winter quarter. But in Korea, I had 3 months. So I was able to do a little bit of traveling in the winter and then come back to visit my family and also spend Lunar New Year with them. And the only downside is we also end around late June as well, but we would still have around 3-month break before the start of fall quarter back in the home university. So if you're considering studying abroad for a year, you would miss out on the chance of being at your home university for both winter and spring. But the trade-off is you do get a very long break.
That's a really good point. So many institutions abroad will have different academic calendars than maybe what we're used to in the US. So as you learn more about your program, you may see that they take place in slightly different times of year for your term. Did anyone try to apply any of your courses to major, minor, or GE credit? Do you have any advice for applicants and who might be thinking about how to fit coursework into their degree requirement and how that works with study abroad?
I did it with mine because I was actually graduating that same year. So it was so I was also studying abroad towards the end of my senior year, and so it meant like what classes to take in order to fulfill my graduation requirements and that I could take abroad. And it really helped that at that point I only had 2 classes left in order to graduate. And although I was actually a music major, most study abroad programs typically don't have like a specific arts course unless like it's done through a specific university. But luckily, because of the I sent in like the curriculum for my previous courses and as well as showcasing some of my classwork, that was enough to go through most of the prerequisites I needed so I could enroll in the music classes when I was at NUS. And that was also the experience with other people that I met at Singapore because some of their classes just had a lot more prerequisites than they were used to just to enroll in one class.
Mm. Thank you so much. That's really helpful feedback. Are there any more thoughts on this question, or shall we move on to the next one? Does anybody else have something they want to contribute?
I can say something about it, but for UCSB, I know for like all the UCs, they have like their own little credit abroad database from like past UC students. But also for UCSB, we have like from some departments, they make available like courses that are already pre-approved for credit, for major credit specifically. So I was able to do like some of my major stuff, even some of my minor stuff as well abroad. And I think just, as long as you check with like departments of your campus and whatnot for your major and kind of go over those kind of courses, I think it's a valuable resource to kind of guarantee, or at least raise your chances of getting that credit that you need to graduate.
That's great. And it's never too early to start that process. Go ahead, Sindel.
Just want to add that I also apply my major credits from the pre-approval list, but also just want to highlight for global studies major in particular, the regional concentration courses can be fulfilled from like basically any cultural or social sciences courses that you take, and whichever region you studied for your program, those courses will be categorized into that region's concentration courses for the upper division requirement of global studies major for at least for UC Santa Barbara. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hannah, any concluding thoughts as an academic specialist on the topic, or do you want to move on to the next one?
Just really quickly, I think everything that's been shared is great advice, but reach out to your campus your campus academic advisor, your major advisor, minor advisor, college advisor. As a UCEAP student, all of your credit is UC direct credit. It's not transfer credit. So that means that you will get UC units towards your graduation, and the grades will count towards your GPA. But if you want a particular course you take abroad to fulfill a specific major requirement or a GE, that is going to be up to your major department or your college. So reaching out to those advisors, asking them what their process is, what their policies are, can help you plan ahead when you're looking at which courses or a program might work for you. Tamaya, go for it.
I want to add to that. I did a language course. When I came back, I asked the Japanese department if that can count as a level 3 language, because that's the requirement I have as a College of Letters and Science student, and they said that it wasn't that level, but on my DARS it says I completed the course requirement. So it's a little complicated, but overall I think it's completed. Yeah, for the language course requirements, they do tell you though that you should bring back all your textbooks and everything you did to prove that you actually did it, in case they need to check that you actually got a good score in the program. So just be aware of that. Sometimes you need to prove what you did by bringing the books. Don't just throw them away.
It's a very good point. I had to do a similar process to legitimize some of the courses I took as well. Okay, excellent. Well, there was a question that Madeline asked us that Pavel has already done a wonderful job of answering, but I thought I'd bring it to the broader group because I think it's an interesting topic. And Madeline's question was, I'm not too worried about the workload, but one thing that is pulling me back from going abroad is the possible cultural difference for living in another country for a prolonged period of time. Is there anything to consider for that or some tips? And Pavel, do you want to start by just reiterating what you've already said to Madeline, and then we can, so the broader group can see it, and then we can have other panelists chime in?
Yes. So one of the things that I guess to talk before I answer your question, the reason I went abroad to Korea was because I actually wanted to learn not so much about the classes that I took, which of course were interesting, more about the culture and not culture that I was already familiar with, to exchange friends, Korean exchange friends that were living at my university. But I wanted to experience it firsthand and just see the people and eat their food and follow their habits. So for me, it was I knew I was expecting the change, therefore I was ready to embrace it. Um, a tip that I would recommend would be to learn as much as you can about the country that you're visiting, so you do not have this cultural shock that may come. I know every country has its pros and cons, and when you learn about both, you are able to better navigate any problems that you may encounter. But just to reiterate, I think cultural differences in your country, in your host country, are one of the best things that you have. Because if it was the same, then like what's basically that takes so much about studying abroad. I've also about the, and I'll notice I've also studied abroad before in Japan for 1 year, and I noticed that the more that you are in another country, the more that you taking from their culture as well. So you'll be surprised depending how long you stay, how much you take in from them. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. Does anyone else have thoughts on this subject? Yeah, Tamaya, go for it.
So I know I was there for 2 months, which doesn't seem like that long of a time, but also I'm an international student to America, so I have great experience in living in another culture as I do it full time. And I think, it depends on how culturally flexible you already are. You can learn to be more flexible, but as long as you accept the local customs, and I think it's very manageable. Japan is very different from America, but it wasn't difficult at all for me to adapt. And even me and my classmates started picking up some of the mannerisms, like some of the, how when people are surprised, you're like, oh, well, people are like, eh, and we all were doing that after a while. I don't think culture shock is as difficult as I expected, but but after a while, people did start missing their own culture. Like a lot of people in my program missed driving or ranch, the sauce. That was a big thing for some reason. So I think it's not something to be afraid of because you will most people will enjoy the difference in culture and you will like the difference. And even if you do really miss your own culture, there's usually ways you can, interact with your own culture. Like some people went to get their nails done in American style, or they went to get burgers, there's you don't have to feel completely isolated if you do. There's ways to get around it.
As a passionate ranch person, I understand and relate to that. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I think for most like for the shorter term programs or even like a semester, usually we'll experience the honeymoon phase first, right? And the culture shock or the homesick phase won't come until later. And I think it will be a bigger challenge for year program participants because you're somewhat used to this culture, like to the host culture, but you're still like sort of homesicking and missing your home culture, and you're in the middle. So I think I think so for year participants, it's even more important to like get the most out of your time while you're there and your to maximize your experience. So that it would, when you get to that phase, or if you ever get to that phase, your stress could be alleviated. At least for a bit. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for your thoughts on that subject. Hannah, do you want to move on to a next question? We have a few in the chat. Some of them seem pretty specific.
One question I thought was a really interesting question. And I think it's important for folks to think about and something that you may not be considering when you're just getting excited and thinking about studying abroad. But the question is, socially, was there an instance of discrimination you faced based on your nationality, race, or gender? Anything that you want to share, maybe how you experienced it, resources? I see a lot of hands, so maybe Pavel, start with you and then we'll go from there.
So again, I did two study abroad. I did Yonsei. Everything perfect, nothing happened. I did one in Japan. I had an incident where I was at a Starbucks, and then I got a call from my mom. I'm Mexican, so we're speaking Spanish outside of the coffee shop, and then I hear somebody screaming, and then I see, and it's a Japanese man, and then I see him coming forward, and then I'm trying to figure out what he's saying, and because he's speaking Japanese slash English, and I hear him saying bioterrorist, and then he comes closer, he's approaching me, and I was like, oh, he's screaming at me. So I go inside the store and he's following me, telling me we do not need bioterrorists in Japan. And back then my Japanese was not really good, so I couldn't really respond. But luckily it was with some friends that kind of like I was able to take some shelter in. No, but it was he was eventually he left. He kept repeating the same thing, so nobody really did anything. But also I didn't really feel in danger. I just thought it was quite interesting what just happened. I did contact, for example, I was living in a dorm, so I contact my dorm was the manager just to let them know. So they talked to me about like if we needed to proceed with telling the police or anything or what I wanted to do. I contact also my UCAP, not my UCAP, but my study abroad advisor. Personally, I found the experience more interesting than anything because for me, I don't know, it was just because I never really faced at least racism in that like that face on until Japan. But yes.
Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have any experiences? And, these are obviously important to hear about, but maybe you can share if you have experience in maybe like, was this common or are these examples of like one-off instances, just to help people kind of get expectations around this, because it is something we don't think about. We have our lives here in California at our UC campus, and it is going to be different abroad.
Well, you had more you wanted to say?
Yeah, I do want to read it. This, I think it is really one off. I've never heard of anyone else happen. Japan has one of the best, most gentle people I've ever met. Strangers will help you find your way through the station if you're lost. Please don't make that, don't, what I just told you, don't let that get in the way of going to Japan or even Korea. Korea people are also wonderful people to welcome you and help you around. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Daniel, I think you've been wanting to share as well.
I'm also Hispanic, so it was although it didn't go into a situation like Pavel's, but it was interesting because although Singapore is very multicultural and they have people from all over Southeast Asia, they also if they don't know like who you are without them asking you, they just start assuming who you are. So although most of the time it was like not because they were doing it on purpose, but some people may think I was Indian, and so then they would start speaking to me in their mother tongue, and then I just look at them and be like, I don't know what she said. Or they would think I'm Filipino, in which case they would also sometimes it would lead to like a negative reaction if I tell them that I'm not Filipino because they think I'm lying to them, which was a interesting situation that happened to me in Malaysia. And the other thing was just our nationality of being American attracts a lot of questions to people, especially because for some reason, for all the countries I was in, I was the only American in like the group I was part of. And so they would just come up to me and ask me very banal questions. And so I guess like if they do, I guess try not to. I'm not sure, but it was just a very awkward experience where they just kind of ask you very like either American-ish questions. They would think about American stereotypes, and so then it would just kind of be like it just ends up being a back and forth with certain people. So that was, I guess, the biggest takeaway was just our nationality can attract people to just give us a lot of questions that we are not prepared to answer at all, or just on your appearance may just lead into just different situations.
Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Tamaya, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to the nationality thing, because I'm just like a white girl, everybody thought I was American, which was quite, I mean, I usually don't like that because I feel like it raises what I actually am. But when I told people where I'm actually from, they were always very cool. They're like, "Oh, that's very cool. That's positive." Like, "Ah, Czechoslovakia," and I'm like, technically no, but you know, it's not a nice thing to say to them to middle-aged girls. Like, no, yeah, you're good. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, that's correct. Um, but the only one time my nationality was actually called into question was by the other students in my program because I was probably I think the only person who wasn't actually an American citizen because I wasn't. So they would say that we had the UC students. I was the only international one, and then we had students from France and Hong Kong. And my American classmates would call them the international students, which is crazy because we were all international students in Japan. And there would be, and so that's another thing I noticed. Like, if I feel like actually the Japanese people were way more understanding of other nationalities and more culturally respectful than my own American counterparts. No offense, Americans, but just yeah, I had some weird comments on that.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you all being like vulnerable and sharing these experiences. It's really helpful for people to know, and that sometimes it might be the last thing that we are thinking about when we're excited and thinking about what's to come. So I appreciate the question being asked, and I appreciate all to all you panelists for answering the question. And I just want to share a resource as well. UCAP does have an Exploring Your Identity Abroad series that applicants you might be interested in checking out. It kind of just helps talk about things that you might not already be considering and talking about what your support network is, things to consider when you're looking into studying abroad in your identity. But I'll hand it back over to Bryn for the next question.
Okay. I think this question is an interesting one to pose to the whole group. So how difficult would you say it is to get by in a country hosting your exchange program if you don't know the language? So, for example, did you take your courses in English or did you take your courses in that country's language? And how did you navigate things like public transit, making friends, everything in that regard?
I could go ahead and start this one off. So prior to leaving for Korea, I did take language courses the year before. And so even with just learning the basic alphabet, the Korean alphabet, it was still very difficult because I was able to read some of the words, but I didn't understand what it was. And so to help me navigate, I would have my they use Papago, which is their equivalent of Google Translate in Korea. So it would be that, or their equivalent of Google Maps is Neighbor Maps. So I would have that open and I would use that to communicate with people wherever I needed to get to, or if I had a question. And a lot of the time, body language also helped because of that language barrier. So body language is your best friend.
Thank you so much, Vivian. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so before going to Japan, I actually pretty much had no experience in the language. Um, I but of course, once I got there, I spent the whole year studying the language and doing coursework in Japanese to learn Japanese. But most of my other classes were, just in English. But I would say spending the time there, especially since I spent so long there, over time it just became easier and easier. But even at the beginning, I never had any problems. I never had to ask anyone for directions. I feel like technology is just so powerful in its own right. Like I never um, really needed to go beyond that, especially since a lot of like signs and whatnot are generally translated into English sometimes. and that makes it very easy to kind of navigate where you're going if you're using the buses or the trains, or you're in the airports especially. You'll often you'll be met with a lot of conveniently translated signage, and especially in the tourist areas and like restaurants and stores and whatnot, there's a lot of uh, bilingual employees that speak usually English and Japanese, of course.
Thanks so much, Evan. Anyone else have any thoughts on this question?
Before we move on, I just want to make a quick note that Zinduo had to sign off a little bit early, so we thank her for her participation. But just so you know, if there are Hong Kong specific life in Hong Kong questions, we may not be able to answer those for the remainder of the session.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say we've got a few questions talking about senior year graduating after your final term. It sounds like some of our panelists have experience with this. I will say I can just speak very generally. If you are planning to study abroad for your last terms at UC, those will be your last terms abroad. You should reach out to your campus study abroad advisor to ask like what your campus's requirements are, what their policies are for when you will declare for graduation and things like that. Sometimes UCEAP programs, because they are what we talked earlier about different calendar times, you may not be able to walk during your graduation. Sometimes you might be able to. It's really going to depend on the program. So reach out to your campus study abroad advisor to start talking about that. And another thing to keep in mind is grades through UCEAP are often available much later than you're used to at a UC campus. So sometimes grades will come back after your potential like deadline to file for graduation. So you might have to file in a later term. That doesn't mean you have to like re-enroll and take classes in that interim, but you might just file later. Like for example, I think I took my final 2 quarters abroad, and even though I was done in June, I had to file for graduation in summer. But if anyone else has experience with completing your program or your degree abroad, go ahead. Go for it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go. So my last quarter abroad, which was my summer of 2024, this one that just passed was also when I graduated, right? However, so being abroad the institution abroad has different schedule from back at UC Davis, and I really wanted to do my commencement, right? I wanted to walk. And so I was like, well, when should I walk? They told me that if I go abroad, I'm not gonna graduate till December. And so a lot of information, right? So what did I do? First, I contacted my study abroad advisor, and then I also talked with my college, and then also with my major advisor, and just a lot of coordination. You need to do a lot of coordination just to make sure that it's gonna work, that you're gonna have your requirements. And then second, something that I learned, at least for UC Davis, filing for graduation is different from applying for commencement, right? Commencement, that's what we think of like attending graduation, right? So you can actually, at least in my case, you can graduate without going to commencement, or you can do to commencement without having graduated. So in my case, I was like, okay, so a lot of my friends are doing commencement in June, which is before my study abroad. I'm gonna do commencement in June and then go to study abroad and then file for graduation. So despite having graduated after, I filed for graduation after my study abroad, I still walked the commencement before in June with my friends. So just make sure you have this in mind when you think of your plans and studying abroad. It's definitely doable. Just talk to your advisors and see what you can work out.
Thank you so much.
And then, at least for the case with me, because the spring session was also like the last time I was going to be at the UC Irvine, it helped that because it was the semester system, it started right at the start of January and ended in May 15. And at that time, UC Irvine's, I think, finals week ended around June 17th. So that meant that I actually had like about a month gap between coming back to the US and actually graduating. it also helped that by that point of time, I only needed one class left towards my major and graduation requirements. So I wasn't too much in a stress of like, oh, whether or not it was going to affect my graduation rate. At that point, it just became into which class they were going to accept as that lower division class. As I had a help with my academic advisor, and like because they gave me a sheet of paper, and I just had to list off what potential classes I wanted to take in Singapore, and uh, and then also just find out what classes were similar here. So then they would just count towards that last lower division class I needed for my major.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hannah, unless you have anything else to add, I was thinking we can move on to another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So we both Brendan and another attendee have asked similar questions regarding the balance between coursework and travel. So did you do much travel around both your host country and maybe other parts of Asia while you were abroad? How did you balance that against the coursework that you had? And did you feel that it was an easy balance to strike, or did it prove challenging? Daniel, you kick us off. You're nodding.
It was also the one thing is that Singapore is very small. It's as big as Los Angeles, actually, if it was just a single island. And for many people, even if they're only there for a day for a layover, they say that the country is too small to travel. But I realized that I have 15 weeks there. I might as well like find a way to make it interesting. So I had one day off during the week, which was a Thursday, where I had no classes. So I would just go visit a different part of Singapore every week. So that's how I did it. And then my midterms was we had a whole week just for midterms. However, mine was just a presentation that was done before the actual midterms week. So that meant that I went to Malaysia for that whole week. And then we had a whole week to prepare for finals and 2 weeks of finals. However, my finals were final projects, which I just did on my laptop in Thailand and in Taiwan. So I did 3 weeks of traveling to Thailand, Taiwan, and Vietnam um, during those remaining 3 weeks I had. Although that also meant um, I'm figuring out if I'll make it back in time, as well as making sure that I turned in everything at the correct deadlines, because I was traveling into different time zones, even though they were just an hour apart. But because they're an hour apart, you might think you're still in your original time zone that you've been used to. So it's important to always like check what time is it where you're currently at if you decide to travel to another country that has a different time zone.
I really appreciate you sharing those caveats and warnings. This is why we typically advise students not to travel until they're done, because things like that can happen. You never know when there's going to be a technical glitch. You're not in the country, and like wherever you are, you don't have internet access and you can't submit your exam, your final paper, your project. Time zones, things like that is where like, UCAP will probably not be able to help you. So that's great advice. Keep that in mind. Most of the time, it's be on the safe side, stay where you are. But if you do make that decision if you have like a final paper due and you want to travel, just really make sure that you're meeting those deadlines. Tamay, I see you have your hand up.
I mean, my course was shorter, but because it was 2 classes in 8 weeks, we had a lot of midterms and a lot of finals, but we also had weekends off, so people took advantage to travel. Usually we would stay within Japan because Japan is pretty big, citation needed. A lot of people did like short weekend trips like to Kyoto, Kobe, I'm totally forgetting the other one, Wakayama. One of my classmates went to Tokyo on a night train and climbed Mount Fuji and came back. Very cool. We had a 3-day weekend once because it was Veterans Day, and a group decided to go to Korea on that weekend. They think they missed 2 days of actual school because they did not come back in time, because Korea is actually kind of far away to go by ferry. But so traveling is possible, especially if you make time. And for balancing coursework and traveling, I think it's important to have fun, but also not let your coursework totally fall apart. I think it's important to work on your coursework to get it to a level that is acceptable for you. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I was like, I am not going to travel so much that I don't pass this not very hard class, but also don't just spend your whole time studying, otherwise it's not going to be very fun. Also, I'm going to keep going, sorry. There was also the STEM Research in Osaka program who we knew, and they worked in a lab full time. And they, even though they had to work in a lab, they took times and days off to have travels because it's more flexible. So if you're doing a research experience, it's more flexible, but also busy.
I know for Korea, I planned my schedule so that I would have my Fridays and Mondays off so I could travel and get the cheapest airfare whenever I wanted to leave somewhere. But also a lot of my professors, they understand that you are an international student and you're here to also explore the country. And so they'll have a certain amount of excused absences where you can skip up to a certain number of classes for you to travel. And they encourage you to use these when you do want to go somewhere. But keep in mind that you do have to be on top of your classwork and assignments and make sure that you still turn them in on time. And as long as you're able to manage that, you should have no problem.
That's a really good point about professors' expectations and host institution policies, because there are some host institutions that have very strict attendance policies, to the point that sometimes if you do not meet those attendance policies, you might not even be allowed to take the exam and you would fail that class. So I think once again, we're hitting a topic that's really going to vary program to program, department to department, and sometimes professor to professor. So as an academic specialist, I do have to put the plug in there for going to class and keeping up on your coursework. But of course, study abroad is such a wonderful opportunity to experience new things. So I think everyone that shared your responses, I really appreciate you talking about that balance of coursework, but also taking advantage of the time you have.
Evan, I saw that you had unmuted yourself for a moment. Did you have something you wanted to contribute before we move on?
Yeah, so just a tip for people going to Japan. Most institutions in Japan, they offer this thing called like schooling institutions. They offer this thing called gakuwari, which is basically like student discount for like JR travel. So like the trains, more specifically the bullet train, you get like a 20% discount or something on the bullet train tickets, and you have like a certain amount allotted to you for like the year or whatever like program length you're doing. That kind of depends on like I'm not so sure about like if you're doing like a UC study center program, but for like other Japanese institutions, generally that's something to like for students, like if you have a break or something and you want to like make use of that, that's a pretty good thing.
Also, with the university temporary card, we were able to get to free museums, which was really cool because you usually have to pay money, but we got into them free. Very cool. And free shrines and castles.
Yeah, any other like places that offer like student discounts, you know, you show them your student card or something.
Always show them. Like one time I showed them thinking I'd get a small discount, but they just let me in for free, and I was like, yes, money saved on going to the small castle.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely take advantage of all those opportunities that you can. Thank you so much. We only have a little bit of time left, so we did have a question if any of you did an internship while abroad. So if so, do you want to share a little bit about your experience on your internship? Okay.
Okay, go for it, Vivian.
Sorry, I did intern abroad in the spring semester. I worked as a marketing intern for a jewelry museum near Gyeongbokgung Palace, and so I had to create marketing campaigns for their Instagram and work with Photoshop and Illustrator to generate PR campaigns to help elevate the storytelling of what Korean culture is and how to preserve that with the Gen Z and millennial audience. And it was really cool because every Friday I would take the bus to Gyeongbokgung Palace, and then I would be in my K-drama moment where I'd walk to the company office. And being able to work with Elaine was a truly valuable experience because I was able to tap into the UI UX design field that I wanted to explore. And I'm really glad that she gave me the opportunity to do so. And it made me think about how I wanted to navigate my career in design, but also incorporate some of that with international business and finance as well.
Thanks for sharing that. And I will say not every single program through UCAP has internships available, and those that do, it's going to be a variety of scenarios. So on the UCAP program page, they have a lot of different tabs: housing, academics, and one of which would be internships if they're available on your program. That would give you an idea if it's something that the program can help you arrange or something you need to find on your own. So that's a really great resource if you're interested in internships. I do really want to be mindful of our time. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brent. Did you want to add something?
I was just going to mention that we do also have an internship award once you return to your UC campus. So if you are going to conduct an internship, go ahead and save some materials from your time abroad. And when you get back, you can apply for this. If you have any questions about it, you can reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with the correct person who right now I believe is Veronica, and they will give you more information about how to go about applying. But you can get up to $1,000 as a recognition of the work that you did in your internship if you're willing to share some details about it with other students.
That's a great plug. And we also have another award for research as well. So definitely something to consider if you're doing internships or research. We are getting close to our 5 o'clock ending time. So I think we want to have maybe 2 final questions for the panelists. One, a student has asked about housing. So just in general, if you could share maybe some of your experiences with housing. Was it provided through your program? Did you have to find it on your own? Did you live with local students in your host country? Did you live with UC students? Just some general thoughts on housing. And I'll just kind of add the general, each program is different disclaimer that this is a lot of detailed information that you might find on the UCAP website on the housing tab, but really looking forward to hearing our panelists' experience with their housing on their programs. And then after that, we'll kind of do some final thoughts. Go ahead, Pavel, and then Tamaya after.
Okay, so for me, my housing, Yonsei had a couple of options. You could do a couple of their dorms, and it was through a lottery process. Obviously, if you apply to the older dorm, it'll be more likely that you get in. The good part about the benefit of living in the dorm is that you're close to the university. It is actually a lot of the time less expensive than a dorm in the US. You also had the option to rent out an Airbnb. In our case, I know some students did that. I would say that depending how stressed you want to be about your living situation, that's how you can decide what to do between an Airbnb or even a host family, depending on the situation or the dorm. The dorm is going to facilitate a lot of things. You're not going to have to worry about buying toilet paper for the restroom. You're always going to have somewhere to go back to. You have friends. You also have a community because a lot of the dorm people want to become friends with you and you want to become friends with them. So it's a great place to be great friends. Other than that, I think I share pretty much everything. Somebody else can chime in.
Sorry, can I go? Okay, I lived in a dorm, which is that was actually the only option for a program, and it was really great because it was a single dorm with a private bathroom. It was bigger than my triple at UCLA. There was a cafeteria that was really good and super cheap, and it was really convenient because we lived at the Japanese language Kansai Center, which is also where the classes were, so we could just go to class by going down. I'm very enthusiastic. I loved it. Was so convenient. It was like better than how I live here. The only disadvantage is it was in the suburbs of Osaka, which is about 35 miles from the city center, but there was a really awesome train that took you there in 40 minutes because public transport in Japan is amazing. A lot of the people in the other program I met did homestay, which has the advantage of getting food, but also the disadvantage that you have to like deal with people and you kind of like there's like a language barrier and you don't know what kind of conditions you're getting to. Like, so one of the guys I was speaking to was in kind of a modified laundry room for his whole stay. Someone in the STEM research in Osaka program got kicked out of his homestay family for doing something really outrageous and had to move to a hotel. hotels are also an option, but they pretty much are like dorms. Some say there's an option to find your own apartment, but I've been looking and that seems to be the most expensive option. Usually the dorm is the easiest and the path of least resistance, so to say. And also it was pretty cheap. It was so much cheaper than the housing at UCLA. And it was a single. So I actually don't be afraid of the housing. That actually is a great improvement on whatever the current situation is most likely.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Daniel, please.
Um, from my experience with Singapore, I chose the cheapest housing option because I was already kind of doing this all in a shoestring budget, which actually made the trip a lot more memorable because of learning how to maximize how much money you can use. But I actually chose the cheapest dorm, which ended up being, it might be like the best option because that meant mostly everybody there were local students. And so out of all the exchange students, I think we were only 50 out of think it was like 300 or so local students in that dorm. And the thing is, all us exchange students got our own rooms as well. And even then, it was less than $2,000 for the entire semester. So that was also less than what I was paying for like my shared apartment with 4 people at UC Irvine. Although it does show that you could like live outside the campus in Singapore, it is not recommended because it is really hard to get an apartment uh, in Singapore, even for locals. However, because Singaporean universities typically have up to 1/4 of the entire student population as exchange students or international students, they also have international dorms or hostels for a set of students as well. So if you're not for some reason you're not able to get housing within the university, there's also like international dorms nearby the universities, as well as some of the local private schools usually also offer a place in their own dorms as well for exchange students. And the benefits of being in that dorm was also that we had a meal plan, so you didn't have to worry about buying food. Although local Singaporean food is also really cheap in their hawker centers. So it was the best of both worlds where you have food that you don't have to pay for throughout the week. And then the weekends you get to just go to the hawker centers and eat over there. And because also the dorm was mostly local students, they gave us like special field trips just for us. They took us biking at night, biking from the airport back to the dorm, and also like took us kayaking as well. So we got to have like a lot more bonding with them compared to all the other dorms, at least.
Thank you so much. That sounds like a lot of fun. And it's great to hear all of your different experiences with your housing abroad. And we only have one more minute. And given that this is an evening session, I think I'm reluctant to run long as others probably have other commitments. So I just want to thank all of our panelists so much for coming along and sharing your expertise and your experience today. And thank you to all of those in the chat who asked questions. And Hannah has a few little follow-up items for us in terms of what you can do next to facilitate your UCEAP program.
Yes, thanks everyone again. And let me just get to our next slide. So for next steps, I think a lot of you who are in attendance are already familiar with the UCEAP website, but you can take a look. We have a lot of information there. Visit your UC Campus Study Abroad website, visit your UC Campus Study Abroad office, get to know them. There's a lot of great folks that are willing and happy to help you. Drop into UCEAP office hours. If you use this QR code on the slide, you can set up an advising session with us. And I think most of you probably already have started an application, but just in case, you can start an application by selecting the Apply Now button on the UCEAP website. And if we weren't able to answer any of your questions today, if we weren't able to get to them, we have this general email here, info@uceap.universityofcalifornia.edu. You can send an email there and we'll make sure it gets to the best person to help you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for coming along today. And any follow-up questions, obviously, please feel welcome to reach out to Hannah and myself. You can find our emails on our contacts page at the CEAP website. And thank you so much for your time. A big round of applause for our panelists and have a great evening, everyone. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Good
Bye,
luck
everyone.
with application.